So we've discussed the planetaries here and increasing from whatever number you got, 3 or 4 to 6, and the capability of being able to use NP249 and NP231. Both of these are the same. If you're concerned, like size-wise, these are the same. If you're concerned, whatever you do is you just take the input out of the one you're rebuilding and put it in there for your final assembly. So moving on to the chain here, what we have is this is the NP231. Right off, this is I do believe it's a wider chain, not by much, but it's wider, but it's also shorter. So here's the NP231, and right here is the NP241. So this is a longer chain, narrower, but it's a longer chain. And also too, note the size of the gears here, right? So these are the gears for this one. So these gears are smaller in diameter. And the other thing too that I personally don't like is that the gear is permanently attached to the shaft here. Doesn't make it friendly to work on, you know, for assembly and disassembly. This one here, you could basically take off the gears and the chain all in one go. Slide those off of the shafts here. Here's the one shaft, so that gear would slide onto here, and then the other gear would slide onto here, and you would be able to grab that whole thing, slide them off of both shafts, and the shafts remain, you know, partially installed into the transfer case. And this one over here, not as friendly to work with. So that's all redundant because we can't use this chain or gears on that. So those parts aren't interchangeable at all, so that's a wash. Playing around with these planetaries, what I did was the one planetary on the bottom didn't have all the 6 holes in it, so I just lined it up, took all the gears out of this one here, lined it up, and so just an attempt to line up the pin in the hole there, and just kind of feeling on the side to make sure it's all lined up. And then hold it together with the vice grips and use a 31/64 drill bit, drill it through, flip it on the other side, and do the same thing. So you drill one side and then the next, and now I've got all the holes drilled in there, so I can put 6 planetaries in there, 6 pinions in the planetary gear set. Just got the planetary in the press here. I just find a punch that fits just inside that little recess of the pin there, and we're just going to press that down, and it'll press it down, and then this punch will go down into the gear. That punch will come down to about here, and the bottom of the pin will still be stuck into the housing here, the cage. And so take it out of the press, take it to the shop bench there, and then you can take your punch out and well, actually take your punch and tap that pin down a little more until it's basically flush with the bottom of the cage. And then with the punch inside the bore, it should hold all the needles and everything like that from falling out. And then you pull that punch out, take it apart on the bench, and then you won't lose any of the pieces. So we brought the planetary to the bench here, and you can see the punch is still resting in here, and maybe you might be able to tell, but there's all the needles. There's all the needles down in there. And so this is basically holding everything together here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to grab a hammer. We're just going to tap this a little further. I can move it by hand. We're going to have to tap it a little further so that this is basically to the edge. And when it is, then we can pull this whole gear and all the needles and everything out together onto the bench here so we don't lose anything. So I've tapped this end with the hammer here to try and get it right to the end as far as I can. And I think now if we rotate this, we might be able to get that gear out of there. So what we'll do is we'll pull this punch out, and then the gear should come out. Drop everything onto the bench here so we don't lose nothing. And there's all of our needles should all be inside there. And here's the 2 outside washers and the 2 outside bearings. And there'll be another washer in the center there, needles on either side. Also, you can see that pin is just flush with the end of the bottom there, and then that's how we slid that out. And then as you take a look, it's pretty dry and rusty. This one was wore. These other ones, they don't rock back and forth. They're still pretty tight and good. But in this case here, you could see how dry and rusty that is, and this one was loose. So this pin is wore too. And this is the NP249 that we drilled those holes in with the drill press there. We lined up all the holes with that other cage, and we drilled them in, and it doesn't look too bad. But you know, if for example, if you take a look at this factory one, it's pretty close to the edge there. So a person doesn't need to get so meticulous about that being exactly centered in that recess there. For me, what I wanted to do is I wanted to line everything up with the other one and then drill those holes. And then when I was done, get a drill bit to go through both of them, make sure that it goes through both holes and turns, and basically those holes are lined up really well.